noisy, turbulent 60s separate us from an earlier time, a time when things were quieter. The truth is that most of our major institutions, in a very short time, have lost much of the hold they used to have on the minds and imaginations of Americans, especially young Americans. Blind obedience to any kind of authority seems a thing of the remote past. People are asking why a lot more than they ever did before. Schools and businesses find they can no longer run smoothly on the old do-it-because-I-say-so basis. Those who find our churches the prime source of truth and light are a shrinking and aging minority. Our law enforcement agencies are subject to restraints undreamed of 20 years ago. Patriotism that says my country, right or wrong, has given way to a growing one-world feeling, a sense of loyalty to all mankind. Finally, the family, the basic social unit, has changed dramatically. How many young families can you find today in which the child says, "Sir," to the father? Whether you like it or not, whether you think it good or bad, the decline of authoritarianism in our institutions is a fact of life. Take, for instance, the institution of the Air Force.
The whole Air Force is run by threats. Closed, the biggest problem I've ever heard of.
If following an order is a threat to your identity, you're either badly trained or you don't belong in the Air Force.
I tell my guys to get a haircut just to keep the old man off my ass. Personally, I could care less. I'd like to...
The Air Force lies to you. They tell you one thing and then turn around and do another.
The Air Force doesn't keep up with the times.
Pilots must wear goggles when flying in open cockpits.
Knickers are not to be worn by any, repeat, any flying personnel. Scarves over 4 feet in length will not be worn by any Air Force personnel.
Airmen may forego saluting on trolley cars.
So, the Air Force doesn't keep up with the times. Well, in the main business of the Air Force, in flying machines, air weaponry, space research, the Air Force is way ahead of the times. No, the gripe refers to a less apparent kind of keeping up with the times. It refers to a change that's harder to measure. This change is in people, in what they think, in what they respect, in what they're willing to give and accept from the institutions to which they belong.
Let me start out by saying that here at Lackland, in the training center, we teach discipline. This is where the young guys and the young gals come in. The people who come in the Air Force know that they're going to be subject to discipline. They knew that when they signed up. When I ask them if it's too tough, their response is, no, it's not tough enough.
Well, the definition of discipline I like the best, and the one I think is most meaningful, consists of responsiveness to command, mission performance, morale, appearance, number of disciplinary infractions, and of course the response of authority to those disciplinary infractions. There's a popular misconception today that discipline seeks to destroy identity. I don't believe that is true at all. I think discipline defines and refines identity.
The discipline problem in the Air Force, if there is a discipline problem, and I don't really think there is. There are pockets of discipline problems in the Air Force. The reason for it is that we don't enforce the discipline at all levels. There's only one standard for discipline in this Air Force, and it's got to be applied across the board.
Discipline. Dictionaries define it two ways. First, as the control of a person achieved by enforced obedience or order through instruction, drill, or punishment, a process imposed from outside yourself. And second, as self-control, as self-applied training that shapes the mental and moral faculties, a process that comes from within. The two processes are closely connected. One can lead to the other, with some pretty impressive results.
Take a jump on yourself. Come on. Concentrate, concentrate. Set. Bump.
There we go, Johnny, wrap it up now. Wrap it up.
We have a certain drill here that we use where we intercept the ball, and just as the youngster intercepts this ball, he is hit. He is getting conditioned to this so that when it happens into a game to him, he doesn't think the world has come to an end. It's the fact that something happened to him every day of his life on this practice field.
Come on, Pat. Come on, Pat. Now! Come on. Hey, D. Put it away, D. Have some discipline on yourself.
Discipline in a football team is like discipline in life or raising a family or anything else that you must have it. We wear the same uniform. We look basically the same when we put on that uniform. We react the same. We have certain drills that teach this type of discipline. If a person is not willing to succumb to this type of discipline, he doesn't have a place on a football team. They sometimes think it's a bad thing, but I think once they accept the fact that there are results from this and the results are good, they're very concerned with it to start with, but after a while they're conditioned to it and like it. And it pays off.
Coach McKay expects high standards. To get them, he disciplines in practice so that his players practice discipline in games. The same thing happens in the Air Force, except that standards are more stringent, discipline more important.
Those guys are far out. They fly within 6 feet of each other. They really have to have their thing together. And I do too. These guys depend on me to have an airplane that works every time, all the time. If I screw up, well, all I know is I got to have my thing together too, just as much as they do.
What makes an Air Force mechanic's job especially pressing is that he and everyone else in the Air Force is involved in managing the most awesome destructive capability in the history of the world. It's a responsibility that calls for the tightest controls, the lowest margin of error, and the highest level of efficiency. As long as the Air Force is authorized to be a ready fighting force, a highly disciplined response on all levels remains absolutely essential.
I'm on the base softball team, and we've got a championship team. We're in the playoffs tonight. At first, I thought the coach was kind of tough on us. If we gave him any crap or didn't follow the standards for the plays he set down for us, we got benched. I'm on that team because I wanted to be there. And if I don't follow those standards, I just don't fit into that team. Being a machinist requires meeting rigid standards and specifications. If these standards aren't met, the parts won't fit properly. It's kind of like people in the Air Force. If they don't meet these standards and requirements, they don't fit either. So whether it's working here on the lathe or on a softball team or just keeping my room clean, they all require certain standards that the guys upstairs set up for me. And as long as I'm on this team, I'll follow through with them. I've got to. Other people depend on me.
The problem is not really justifying discipline. After thinking about it rationally, its justification becomes obvious. What isn't so obvious is the absolute necessity for the standards that must accompany discipline. Take, for instance, the views of a man who's been through 3 wars, shot down 3 times, evaded capture twice, and has been a prisoner of war.
When I got out of line in the old days, you went to the cavalry for a month and shoveled manure. You didn't get a letter of reprimand. You didn't get anything else. That was a strict discipline. I believe some of the younger people, when they come in, not having, now this is some of them, but not having had authority. They haven't had too much authority to deal with them. They are slightly awed with authority in a way. They're afraid of the man. They're afraid he's going to jump, his supervisor's going to jump down his neck. So he, in a way, and he doesn't want to accept responsibility because sometimes they haven't had too much responsibility. So this is a hard thing for the young one to overcome. Then on the other side, we have that 18, 19-year mid-range NCO who never really got ahead, but he kind of resents the younger one because he had to go through that real strict type of discipline himself, and now the Air Force is getting a little permissive, and they kind of resent this. They kind of resent the younger man not having to go through the same thing they do. Now, this causes a big breakdown in communications to me.
In the armed forces of a democracy, the giving and the taking of an order has always been a delicate matter. I first became aware of this problem way back in World War II when I was commissioned on the battlefield at Bastogne. One day I was an enlisted man, a sergeant. The next day I was a commissioned officer, a gentleman by act of Congress. I remember how hard it was to shift into the new role, even to accept a salute from an old friend. We all undergo changes that require us to react differently in different roles. Unless we understand these reactions, we're apt to become victims of emotions all out of proportion to the situation.
Hold it, Sarge. Take your hands out of your pockets and put your hat on.
Yes, sir.
Put it on right and keep your hands out of your pockets. What outfit are you in?
What?
What outfit are you in?
1365th,
Who's your first sergeant?
Sergeant Edwards.
Thanks.
Who's yours?
Just keep walking, Sarge.
What's wrong here? One way to look at this kind of an exchange is to see it as a loser's game, one that's doomed to failure from the start. Dr. Eric Berne, a psychologist, developed a school of thought called transactional analysis as a way to analyze the dealings or transactions between people in any situation. He suggested that because of early family experiences, each of us grows up with three distinct people inside us: the child, the parent, and the adult. Dr. Berne believed that what we say to others comes from one of these three internal people. For example, listen to what happens between two workmen on a job.
Hey, have you seen my wrench?
Yeah, I think it's in the garage.
The two adults here are communicating with each other quite successfully. But see what happens when it's the parent who starts the dialogue.
Well, where did you leave my wrench this time?
Don't blame me if you can't keep up with your damn tools.
Obviously, that interaction was a complete failure. By being a parent, the first man caused his coworker to respond as a child. Such parent-child games are self-defeating and unproductive. But let's see how the theory works in a military transaction.
Haley, how many times do I have to tell you to get your hair cut according to regulations?
Christ, Sarge, why do you keep picking on me? Half the guys around here have hair as long as I do.
Both men have fallen into the trap of not talking to the adult and the other. It's the parent-child game again, and nothing useful can come out of it. Let's take a look at another one.
Underwood, they're really cracking down this week, and I think it's about time you saw the barber.
Oh, thanks, Sarge. It's really nice of you to take an interest. Really.
All right, how's this? You will get a haircut by 1800, and you will see the commander.
Here the sergeant came on as an adult, but the airman responded as a child. Then the parent inside the sergeant took over, and the whole exchange went to hell. Of course, it can happen the other way around.
Hold it, Sarge. I've been looking for you.
Morning, Sergeant.
You know the IG's coming next week?
Yes, sir, I do.
Well, where's that checklist you owe me?
Have you checked your in-basket yet this morning?
No, I haven't.
I got it in there for you late last night.
Oh, well, I guess I could have checked there first.
In these transactions, Dr. Berne's theory can offer us useful insights into our own behavior. I also think that plain good manners, the courtesies of mutual respect, are crucial. We all know how to say yes, sir, or yes, ma'am, in a way that's a true insult. Or we can say it with the easy cordiality of an adult, of a fully confident man or woman, not a child.
They're more intelligent. They're a good bunch of people. There's no question in my mind whatsoever that we're going to have one of the finest organizations in the world in the future. We've got the young people in here now that are great. Discipline is a learning process. Learning, not an authoritative thing. I think they should know why. I don't think it should be just do it now because it's got to be done now. And the poor guy sits there and says, well, okay, it's got to be done. This is blind discipline we had years and years ago. You both have to get that same adult relationship between yourselves. Once you have this, and once the man is trained, your discipline is there. Your standards are met. He does his job. You don't have any problem.
The Air Force has an important job. In order for us to do what's demanded of us, we must abide by certain rules and standards. These standards may not always be easy or comfortable to live with, but we know they're necessary. We know they give us the cohesiveness and common purpose to maintain our effectiveness. Enforcing and abiding by these standards is discipline, a personal obligation all of us share.